Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this rundown of the Tier 9 American medium tank, the M46 Patton. This comes with a big caveat at the beginning. This is the first and to date only Tier 9 machine that I have driven, let alone medium tank. So bear that in mind. I'm not really going to be making many comparisons between this and other tanks because I haven't played them. Just going to be taking this pretty much on its own merits, and that also means that I may well come back to this machine later on to give an updated opinion on it, I guess, once I've played some other Tier 9s. But I thought I'd give you my first impressions of it. Anyway, so historically, where does the Patton come about? Well, basically, the Americans had the M4 Sherman and the M46 Pershing during the Second World War. The Pershing, obviously, in the later stages of that. At the end of the Second World War, the Pershing was reclassified as a medium tank from a heavy tank, but it was decided that the mobility of the Pershing was inadequate. So they set about a project to revamp the tank, to modernise it, to change some of the components, in particular the engine and the transmission. Eventually, there were so many modifications made to it that the American Armour basically decided to give it an entirely new designation and call it a new tank, and thus you get the M46 Patton born. So the idea is basically that this is an M26 Pershing with better mobility, and as time progresses it also potentially gets better firepower. Now, unlike many of the machines in this game, not only did this tank actually exist, not only did it see service with an armed force, it actually got its hands dirty in one of the few instances when the Cold War became hot. So this tank served with the American military from 1949 through to the mid to late 50s, and it was involved in the Korean War, where it was pitched up against North Korean T-34-85s. Yes, that's right, a Tier 9 versus a Tier 6. Imagine who came off the better in that engagement. Anyway, historically, it was a reasonably successful tank, but it was eventually replaced by successive Pattons, and it didn't really see much export, making it, I think it was to Belgium, and that's about it. But what do we have in game? Well, Tier 9 medium tank, 1700 hit points, which is not a bad slab of health. It's a 40-something ton machine, depending on your exact configuration, 43.5 basically, with an 820 horsepower engine, giving this thing a power-to-weight ratio of approximately 19 horsepower per ton, which is pretty nice, and is better than the Pershing before it, even if the Pershing has the top engine. Traverse speed of 38 degrees a second may not sound all that impressive, and a top speed of 40 kilometers an hour is alright but not fantastic, but I will tell you from my own experience that this thing, it moves around the battlefield reasonably gracefully, and I can't really complain with its mobility. But this tank is one of those cases where you shouldn't take the stats in Garage too much at face value, but I'll come back to that a little bit later. The armour scheme I will go into more detail later, but in Garage at least, 101 turret and hull on the front, 76 on the side, 50 on the rear of the hull, 91 on the rear of the turret. This is not a well-armoured machine. The gun I'll talk about in a bit. Turret traverse 40 degrees, which is alright, 410 metres view range, which is very nice indeed at Tier 9, and a pretty typical 745 metre signal range, not that anybody really cares about that. So I mentioned those not believing stats in the Garage. So one thing you have to bear in mind with this tank is that the ground resistances, so that's a statistic that is not shown to you in the Garage but goes into determining how mobile this thing is, how manoeuvrable, are below average for a Tier 9 medium tank, which I wasn't expecting, but there we go, they are. The gun, however, is the complete opposite, so I'll go through the gun stats in just a second, but bear in mind the soft stats on the gun, so things like the reticule bloom and all these statistics that are not shown to you in the Garage but which the game uses to calculate a whole variety of different parameters on this tank are excellent, absolutely fantastic, so you also have to bear that in mind. Speaking of the gun, well, there's a variety of different guns, which usually indicates a painful grind, but we'll get to that in a moment. The moneymaker gun is this, 105mm T5 E1 M2. So it's a 105mm gun. Okay, you saw that one coming. 6.45 rounds a minute, which is a very nice rate of fire for a gun of this caliber. 218 penetration, which is okay, but not fantastic. 265 if you're willing to fire premium ammo. 390 average damage, alpha damage, which is very healthy. Combine that 6.45 rate of fire and the 390 alpha damage, and I believe this tank has the joint second highest alpha damage and the second highest DPM of any of the tier 9 medium tanks, which is quite a nice feature to have. 0.4 dispersion at 100 meters, which is nothing short of abysmal, and a 2.3 second aim time. But as I said earlier on, the soft stats, the gun handling stats on this gun are excellent, and as a result, you will notice the bad accuracy if you're trying to take shots at range, but if you're at close to mid-ranges, the good gun handling stats make up for the slightly dubious accuracy most of the time. So this is never going to be a sniper rifle of a gun, but at close to mid-ranges, it ends up being more accurate than you expect it to. So this is actually quite a nice gun. It's a tier 9 gun. It's not one of these mediums that gets a tier 10 gun. This is a tier 9 gun. But it performs reasonably well. I certainly can't complain about the gun. I think the gun is one of the tank's better features. Even if the penetration is not bad, but not super high, and if the accuracy is rather dubious. So, let's talk about that grind. Well, if you're going up the American medium line, let's just find it. Here we go. T2 medium at tier 2, yeah, it's alright, it's fairly fast, which is nice, and the armour's okay, but nothing special. M2 medium at tier 3, armour again is alright, not that special, does have the option of mounting a 75mm howitzer, similar to that on the T18, which is an interesting option, but not an option I spent a long time with, although I think I did get my ace tanker with that option, so I guess I can't complain too much. M3 Lee, which is generally considered one of the worst tanks in the game, but yeah, some people like it, and looking back on it, I am wondering if it's better than a lot of people give it credit for, but whatever, a lot of people find this very painful and try and get through it. M4 Sherman at tier 5, an iconic machine, but I must admit a machine that when I originally played it, I did not get on with. One day I'll probably rebuy it to have another go in it and do it justice, but at the time I really didn't get on with it. Then you have a choice at tier 6 between the Jumbo and the Easy 8, both Shermans. Basically the Easy E2 or Jumbo gets more armour, the E8 gets better mobility. If you're interested in the American medium line, I would recommend going via the E8. Why? Because the playstyle is more in line with the rest of the, well, tech line. This plays more like a pocket heavy tank. And the E8 is one of my favourite tanks in the game. I love this machine, I think it's brilliant. T20 at tier 7. Things change a little bit. You keep your good mobility, good gun depression. It's not quite as good as the E8, but still good. But you get a much harder hitting gun. So you get a 90mm gun rather than a 76, but you really lose out on the rate of fire and DPM. So you just have to bear that in mind. Oh, and you lose any sort of armour. Pershing, complete change again. This is a relatively well-armoured tier 8 medium tank, kind of a medium-heavy hybrid, which given its history does make sense. The gun is good enough to get the job done. I do have a full review of that tank around. And then you get up to the M46 Patton, which really is a little bit more like the earlier tanks rather than the Pershing. It sacrifices that mobility for a good gun. Sorry, it sacrifices that armour for a good gun and good mobility. But what is the grind on this thing actually like? Well, the answer is, in common with many of the tier 9 medium tanks, bloody awful. Oh, it really is a horrible grind. Right, so, what are you going to have? Well, this is the gun from the Pershing. Excellent. This is a gun that you will not have unlocked yet. This is the gun from the T20. And this is the gun that you want. 105mm howitzer, yes that's right, you can mount the 105mm howitzer from the Sherman at tier 5 on the tank here at tier 9. Don't do it. If you try, you're an idiot. Sorry, but you are. And you even need the upgraded turret to mount that. Just don't do it. So, what about the engines? Well, this intermediate engine here does carry over from the Pershing, which is nice. And this engine is only used on the Patton. And the radio, well frankly, who cares? What does a stock M46 Patton like? Well, you get the engine from the Pershing, so you get a 704 horsepower engine to kick things off with, which is good. but your tracks don't have the weight allowance to mount the gun from the Pershing, and so you're left using the Tier 7 gun from the T20, and you don't want to be using that at Tier 9 really. The only saving grace of it is that you get good premium penetration, APCR, but it's a bad gun. Okay, so what are your options? Well, in my opinion, save the engine for a bit later. It's a good upgrade, but it's not an essential upgrade. You know, you have some mobility with this tank in its quote-unquote stock configuration, unless you didn't unlock the top engine on the Pershing, in which case, may God have mercy on your soul, because that must have been an incredibly painful experience. So what would I recommend? Okay, you can get XP in order to mount this 90mm gun here, the M46, as an intermediate stage. But don't do that, because it's dumb. Why is it dumb? This costs 12,500 experience and 88,500 credits. And it is only a very marginal improvement over the previous gun. Basically, you get the same accuracy, same aim time, same rate of fire. The only difference is that your penetration goes from 160 to 172, i.e. it goes from garbage to slightly less garbage. This gun is terrible. Don't bother with your XP or your time. The tracks are only 23,000 experience, so cut out 13k from your grind and just get the tracks. The tracks are your priority, or use the enhanced suspension module. Pick one. Either way, once you've got that, mount the Pershing's gun, at which point you have still a very painful tank. The stock turret on this, I mean, the Pershing's turret was fairly bouncy at Tier 8, Tier 9 looking rather dubious, and I don't think the stock turret on this tank is even as good as the upgraded turret on the Pershing, so don't rely on the turret armour. This is not really a hull-down tank. Well, not in the sense that you expect it to bounce shots. So once you've got the Pershing's gun, this is still a pretty awful machine. You will then want to grind out, once you've got the suspension, you will then want to grind out or accumulate in free XP 68,000 XP. Which is a metric butt ton. I got fed up with this grind and I just saved up free experience over time to get this gun. It's horrible without this gun, it really is. Once you have mounted this gun, then your life will change for the better. You will realise that this tank does not completely suck and you can actually have fun in it. Then you can take your pick between the increased HP from the engine or the upgraded turret. Choose your poison. But you want to get this gun as soon as you possibly can. So, either use an enhanced suspension module to get the Pershing's gun mounted, and then somehow grind out or get the free XP for the 105mm gun, or grind out the XP for the suspension, mount the Pershing's gun, grind out the 105. Above and beyond that, do what you want basically. And then you will finally have a tank that's not only playable, but it's damn good fun. This is going to be a relatively positive review in case you hadn't already noticed. So, quickly before we move on, crew skills and equipment. Okay, so equipment, you can notice I've actually given it equipment, so you might think I might keep this. Vertical stabilizer, great on the move accuracy then, you want it on this tank. Gun rammer, better DPM, can't go wrong. I've chosen optics to make the most of the 410 meter view range. You could make a case for some other modules, like maybe... I don't know, what else would you want to mount on it? I guess vents if you really want, but you're probably not going to notice the improvement to all your skills. You'll probably be better off with optics, in my personal opinion. Crew skills, 6th sense on your commander. Loader, safe storage, not a terrible idea, although I haven't noticed any particular ammo rack problems with this tank. Brothers in Arms is not a terrible idea, repairs is not a terrible idea, and then you can start working on some other skills. If you've just moved the crew up the tanks, then you'll probably have a fairly decent crew, as I do, when you come to this machine. And then you have a nice, fun tank to play, and it is fun. One thing I should note at the moment is the 10 degrees of gun depression, which is very nice indeed, and in keeping with a lot of the other American tanks. And this tank with 390 alpha damage can peekaboo very, very, very well indeed. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough for the moment. Go and have a quick look at the armour, at some module locations, and then we'll round things off. Oh, but with some games obviously in there, somewhere. Alright, time to have a quick look at the armour scheme on this thing. This will really not take very long. Rear armour, garbage. Rear turret armour, garbage. Side armour, garbage. Side turret armour, can you guess what it is yet? Garbage. If we angle the tank a bit and incorporate the tracks and give it all the benefit of the doubt in the world, you can possibly squeeze something like, in places, 200 to 250 millimeters of armour out the side if your opponent shoots in a dumbass place. But frankly, if it's at this sort of angle, your opponent should just be shooting at the front of the tank. Speaking of the front of the tank, lower plate, garbage. Upper plate, garbage. Turret front. I mean, looking at the shape of this, it's kind of got this conical type shape going on, and you've got an obvious gun mantlet sitting there. And the shape of it, I mean, there are bits of this turret which will give you 400 millimeters of effective armour. If you are lucky enough to get shot right there, or like right here, there was 551 somewhere. So this turret can bounce things, but it's the size of the state of New York, and it's made out of tea towels. I mean, you really can't rely on it to do anything of the sort. Let's assume you're using all of your gun depression, something like that, and then the turret armour starts becoming better, and you can start getting zones that are reliably 200 odd millimeters thick, but they're not very big zones, and basically the frontal turret is garbage. The armour on this thing is terrible. If you bounce something with this machine, it's generally more by luck than design. Sure, you can angle your tank to try and make the most of what armour you do have. You can try and side scrape to make shots go into your tracks, but at the end of the day, this is not a tank designed to, well, tank. It's a mobile, medium tank that will get penetrated by everything and its wife, frankly. Having said that, let's go and have a quick look at where the internal modules are and see, well, how bad it is when you inevitably take some damage. Alright, so a lot of this is pretty standard and isn't going to come as any great surprise. Frontal profile of this tank, you've obviously got the commander's hatch, which is a relatively easy to hit spot on the tank, but you can shoot this anywhere and you'll probably penetrate it. From the front, well, you've got the commander, the gunner, and the loader sitting in the turret. Loader on this, as we look at it, right-hand side, left-hand side if you were the one driving it. Let's say it's port. Starboard, even though this isn't a ship. You've got the gunner sitting here next to the gun, and then you've got the commander sitting a little bit further back. But if you were to put a shot straight through the turret there, I wouldn't be surprised if you could knock both out with one shot. You've got the driver sitting in the front. On the right hand side as we look at it, and so if you put a shot there, the driver's going to be having a very bad day. And technically you can kind of see the ammo rack from the front of the tank, but if you take a look at the side profile, you can actually see that the ammo rack is basically under the turret behind the tracks. So in order for you to actually get a shot at the ammo rack from the front, you're probably going to need some sort of angle up into that lower plate. Not too much of an angle or you'll just miss it, but just enough. And if you were very lucky with a shot, you might be able to take out the ammo rack, the engine, and the fuel tank in one go, which would be very bad for the Patton, but I've never actually experienced that. So this thing doesn't have massive ammo rack problems. Like most, or like many American tanks, it's got a big fat ass that's made of engine and fuel tanks. There's the fuel tanks, there's the engine. If you look at it from the rear, hey look, this is all engine with a massive shoot me sign on it. In case you hadn't figured out that was all engine, it's got enormous radiators going along the engine deck. So yeah, shoot it there and you'll give it a bad day. This is not a small tank, it doesn't have any armour, you're going to take damage, these modules are going to get damaged at some point, you're just going to have to deal with it. It's nice that the ammo rack isn't actually that much of a problem, certainly not as much of a problem as its successor, the M48 at tier 10, but it's enough of a problem to be noteworthy. So yeah, we've waffled on long enough, let's jump into a couple of games. Here is game number 1, and as you can see, as per usual, we are top tier. There are 3 tier 9s per side, and a good chunk of tier 7s actually. This is quite nice matchmaking. We are here on a map that I can never remember the name of, but it's basically the map representing the Caucasus on the Baltic Sea. I think they're on the Baltic Sea. I'm just horribly embarrassed myself if I'm wrong and my geography's failed me. and I'm thinking what to do, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm going to push the right hand side, so the 9 and 0 lines. I am one of our top tier tanks, so I should probably have a good impact on this game. You know, it would be a shame and a bit embarrassing if I didn't do a great deal of much. The fact that I'm including it in a replay probably suggests that I, you know, do at least do something, because otherwise it's a bit pointless showing it to you. As you can see, on this flank at the moment there is me. There is some artillery behind me, and it looks like we've got some people coming over to help out, but they're taking kind of the long route round. Now, the armour on the Patton is not fantastic, and you should never really expect it to bounce anything, but in these sorts of games where there's a respectable number of tier 7s on each side and a good chunk of tier 8s, you know, very few tier 9s, you can pick up some bounces here and there, which is nice. That's one of the things you'll see in this game. So currently being spotted are Type 62, E75 and a Type 59. Type 62 is poodling off toward the town by the look of it. E75 I have no shots on. But I'm just being a little bit cautious, waiting for something a bit heavier to arrive. Having said that, I mean, it's me, a Borsig and a Tiger. The armour on the Patton is not very good, but it's better than anyone else who's currently sitting here. I mean, if that Tiger 2 were to push up, he has better armour than me, but he's not, so screw it. Just seeing what we can. Oh, IS-3. Om nom 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 nom. Well, the thing with an IS-3 is that for this gun, its armour is kind of butter. Its armour does not really work well against this gun at all. I don't really have to aim for weak spots, I just have to aim in its general direction, and I can take nice big ragged chunks out of its health. I mean, he can also do the same to me if he actually hits me, but, you know, c'est la vie, IS-3 is dead. I bounced a shot there from someone, quite possibly that Super Pershing. I bounced another shot there, that one was definitely from the Super Pershing. And so you can see we're bouncing shots with like 170 penetration from our turret, which isn't too shabby. That shot might have tracked the 112 into the bargain, as well as going through his hull, lower hull. And we're seeing it. Gonna see if we could pull off another shot, but you know, our team decides to be eminently helpful, and that Tiger 2 knocks into me. And that shot bounces. I assume it hits his angled upper plate instead of where I actually aimed it, but there we go. And you can see that against lower tiers, this thing has a big hit point pool. It's 390 alpha damage, rips things apart. 219 penetration is more than sufficient against lower tiers, and you know, we're just chewing these guys up. And we're winning 6-1. There's just the Super Pershing over here, and unless he loads APCR, you know, I'm not massively concerned about him. There's also a Tiger over there. Again, he can definitely pen me, but he's only going to do 240 damage with each shot. I'm going to do 390, and so we will quite happily shred that fellow. T25/2, don't really have the best shot in the world on him, and this gun isn't the most accurate, but it does the job anyway, and we get a decent damage roll to take off about half his health. As you can see, against lower tier tanks, this machine is absolutely brutal. Now we do take one penetrating hit there from the Super Pershing, fair enough, but he is now dead. We did actually bounce on the Super Pershing. Tiger has also died. I mean, these guys are just getting absolutely murdered. Oh, sorry, Mr. Borsig. I didn't mean to do that. I hit him the second time because I was typing sorry in chat, basically. He doesn't seem particularly fussed, though. No, I've lost my radio operator, but whoever cared about their radio operator, really, if we're going to be honest. I'm not going to bother putting him back in. Although, if they change around Sixth Sense, as there has been talk that Wargaming are going to, then one's radio operator will suddenly become a lot more important. So I guess we'll see how that goes. There's only 4 of them remaining. At least one of them is sitting on our base. You can see that we are more than mobile enough to catch up with these fellows. It looks like we might even cap before we win this game. Oh, no. Looks like someone got the reset on our base. And there's the IS-2 down by our base. I don't know where the waffle is. Not really too fast. I want to shoot more things, but these guys are going to sit in the cap, so screw it. I might as well pick up some capture points in the process. IS-2 goes down, and that just leaves the Waffenträger. And you can see there, so what this game demonstrated. Against lower tier targets, we bounced 3 shots of the 4 that hit us. Our 105mm gun just chewed them up and spat them out. It wasn't really even fair, and we had the mobility to still get ourselves back into the fight, whereas a heavy tank or something would have really struggled to do that. So it's just a nice little package. A very nice package indeed. The fight was at relatively close range, close to mid-range, meaning that the pretty poor accuracy on our gun wasn't too much of an issue, especially as the targets we were shooting at didn't have particularly thick armour. I mean, it's not as if, you know, this was we were top tier, and we weren't having to shoot at things like ST1s and E75s and all that jazz. We spent most of the game chewing up lower tier targets. So that wasn't too shabby. So have a look at the post-game results, and then we'll jump into a game where we are no longer top tier. Here we are with game number 2, when we are bottom tier, so to speak, but I mean, this is a tier 9 tank. You don't get tier 11 tanks in this game, so there's only so bottom tier you can be. But having said that, you know, a good half of each team is made up of tier 10s, so this is not the friendliest matchmaking in the world. The map is also very definitely not my favourite map. Yeah, it can be a little bit dubious, but I guess whatever, we're gonna see what we can actually achieve. So looking at our various options, I don't really want to go through the middle of the map because there's a very good chance I will run into things like an E100, IS-7, T57 Heavy, Jagdpanzer E100, I don't know. A bunch of things that I don't really want to take on in a frontal engagement. I don't really want to go through the Valley of Death, B8, C9, for very similar reasons, and so, you know, one ends up taking the other route, I guess. So I'm following up behind this Object 140. We've got a T54, Object 704 as well coming with us by the look of it. And hopefully what I'm going to demonstrate in this game is what you can do with this gun, despite the fact that its accuracy is decidedly dubious, and despite the fact that it does not have the penetration of machines like the Centurion 7 or the Type 61 or any of those tanks at tier 9 that gain access to tier 10 guns with something stupid like 270 pen. But you're still perfectly capable of dishing out the hurt. The other thing I'm also going to hopefully demonstrate is this tank's awesome view range. So this setup, I've got optics on this, 410 base view range plus optics equals lots, 462 meters view range plus additional bonuses. And there's a Waffenträger RF-100. Now, I load a high explosive round for this waffle because the waffle's turret is made of tissue paper, wishful thinking, and butterflies' wings. And the high explosive ammo out of this gun has 53 pen and does 480 average damage, which is very tasty indeed. But of course the downside is that it's not much use against other targets, so I'm switching back to armor piercing because I didn't think I had a shot at this Waffenträger, and then it appeared that I did. Rolled low at 335, but I load HE for my second shot, which rolled for 525, a below average damage roll, an above average damage roll. Can't really complain too much about that. Now, looking at the centre of the map, it's looking a little bit dubious, and so I'm thinking about heading back to try and defend against the this push from the centre. So I don't have an effective shot on the Jagdpanzer E100, take a shot at the M103 but it misses, go figure. That's 0.4 accuracy, and to be honest the shot wasn't that well aimed anyway. Trying to pick out the lower plate of this Jagdpanzer E100, but don't manage to do it again. Slightly dubious accuracy for you, and we've lost a whole bunch of tanks toward the north, and again shot falls just short. So at these sort of ranges, and this is engagement ranges of like 400 or 500 meters, the accuracy of this gun can let you down, you know, especially when you're trying to aim at weak spots. So at those sort of ranges, you really want to be aiming at just center of mass, and even then, the gun can fail you. Now, our team has pulled back a bunch of kills, so the scoreline is currently 5-4. But there are a whole world of nasty heavy tanks pushing through the north, so I still want to go back and help defend our base. So, I mean, what you can see here is that this gun is very definitely not a sniping gun. Having said that, this tank can still play a support role. M103, have a shot on the move. I don't really want to sit there because, you know, he has all the advantages. He has the better armour, he has the punchier gun. That's not using the strengths of my tank, so instead I'm just going to move over here. Can't get any shots on that M103, but I can get shots on this plethora of heavy tanks. Have a shot there at the side of the turret of the E100, so we take it. And you can see 390 average damage, but the E100 has such a large health point pool that it really doesn't look like it makes too much of a scratch. That's not an effective shot on the IS-7. The front of the turret on that machine's pretty nasty. Bounce on the front of the E75. But I'm just helping to keep these guys lit up and just putting in some damage. I'm not specifically doing any spotting, but with such a good view range, you shouldn't be surprised if you get some spotting damage anyway. Another shell through the side of the E100's turret. Rolled slightly below average, but not going to worry about that too much. Shot at the rear of the turret now. Another low damage roll for 334, which is a little bit irritating, but there we go. And if that E100 is just going to sit there, I'm going to keep punishing him. Pretty much bang on average, slightly over at 391, but only by 1 HP. Team is currently winning 8-6, which is nice. And I don't really want to shoot the front of an E75. That does not seem like a particularly good game plan. So instead, move over here and try and put fire into the flanks of these guys. And that's what you really want to do. If you are playing a support role, that was a badly aimed shot. If you're playing a support role and, you know, trying to help your guys from any sort of range, you really want to take advantage of people's flanks and rears where you can. Now, take a shot from the IS-7 there, which knocks out my loader, but I put him back in. Yeah, so you don't really want to be trying to put shots into the front of tanks, because generally speaking, you don't have the accuracy to aim for weak spots, and you don't have the penetration to make it work, unless it's a very weakly armoured target. IS-7 is down. That just leaves this E75 and a T-54 and Leopard 1 that are somewhere, but E-75 is currently my main concern. Now, he's currently hull down against me, but he takes his shot and fluffs it. He has a respectably long reload time, you know, 11, 12 seconds, something like that. And I put a shot through his side and then just back off. I mean, I could sit there and just trade with an E-75, but why bother? He actually bounces on me, which is hilarious, and then our artillery derps him to death. So, T-54 now. I have shots into the side of him. Oh, but he turns and makes it frontal shots, but that shot manages to sneak through his side armour anyway. Leopard 1 gets taken down, and this T-54 is the last fellow left alive, and he is dead as well. Didn't pick up any kills in that game, but we did do over 3k damage. Most of it from a respectable distance, and that's using a gun that's not really a sniping gun. We also, with our nice view range, got some spotting damage, always pleasant, and picked up a Confederate medal, which is a nice award to pick up, I think. So, what did we get there? View range, lovely view range. You know, you can just pick up assistance damage, spotting damage, and hence experience and credits just on the fly as you go. It's quite nice. The gun, you can use it at range, just be aware of its limitations. If you're going to use it at any sort of range for whatever reason, try and put it into people's flanks and rears. The armour can bounce shots, but don't rely on it. And the high explosive ammo, it's a 105mm gun. The HE ammo is pretty good. And so against softer targets like the Tier 10 Waffles turret, HE shot can do an awful lot of damage. And bear in mind, in addition to the HP damage, you're also murderizing his crew, knocking out modules, and all that jazz. So that's pretty nice. Let's have a look at the post-game stats, and then we'll jump back to the garage just to round things off. Alright, so what do I think about this thing overall? Well, I obviously like it enough that I'm going to keep it, in case that hasn't become apparent yet. This is a medium tanker's tank. Medium tanker's medium tank, as odd as that may sound. If your idea of playing this game is sitting at the red line at the back of your base, sniping from a great distance, you will not do well in this. If your idea is rushing headlong into the fray with reckless abandon, you will not do very well in this. It is not a sniper, it is not a dedicated brawler, it just doesn't have the armour. But if you like medium tank gameplay, if you like harassing people in a good way, if you like having gun depression to hide as much of your tank as possible, if you can if you can utilise good view range, things like that, and if you know when to use the DPM of your gun and when to run away and not take another shot, then you'll get on with this tank, I think, and I see no reason why you shouldn't do well in it. So far I've got a single mark of excellence on this thing, and my stats in it are alright, although I'm not allowed to win much in it. It's one of those vehicles. I love it and I'm keeping it, but look, 47% win rate. I don't know. I really don't know. That's just the way it goes. Yeah, that's just the way it goes. I mean, bearing in mind, so these stats, so you might look at it and go, your average experience isn't particularly good in that. You know, similar to your KV2, and that's a tier 6. But you do have to bear in mind, of course, that this will include bonus for winning a lot. It will also, incorporates one hell of a painful stock grind that I went through. So do bear that in mind when you judge this machine. Or judge my stats in this machine, I guess. Damage ratio, basically 1.2. Destruction ratio, 1.7. My stats in it are alright. They're not great, but they're alright. But I'm not allowed to win in it. And you've seen a couple of videos I've put up. I've had ace tankers in it. I've had definitely not close to Radley Walters games, 7 kills. I've got my highest ever damage game in this thing. I do like it, and I think it is good. But it's not overpowered, and you do very much have to play within its strengths and weaknesses and get that balance right, otherwise you're just hosed, essentially. But it's a damn good machine, and I think if you've gone up the American medium line, I do not think you'll be disappointed at tier 9. Some people are disappointed at tier 10, but I don't think you'll be disappointed at tier 9. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that review. If I'm very lucky, you may even have found it somewhat informative. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.